He went to the back of his closet to be able to get his baseball cards. I've got baseball cards and autographs. I couldn't get into my closet. It's buried somewhere in the back. Just didn't have enough time. But we're going to do something different. We're going to talk baseball card collecting. We're going to talk about what he's got that he had on his shelves and what I had in my bookcases. Then we're going to talk about baseball books because we're all legitimate big-time fans who like to read. And then the third segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of sports and how it's evolved and how it's changed in America. So, John, we got a lot to cover. Let's start with baseball cards. Let's start with your collectibles and what you have. Show our viewers on our live stream and describe for everybody else listening on audio how you got into this and what you have.
Okay, well, when I was a kid growing up, I remember we used to live. I grew up in Burlingame, which is up near the San Francisco airport. And right behind our house, a block away, we'd go to little kids, we go into the liquor store and we buy baseball cards. Whenever we had a couple of quarters in our pocket, you get the, 10 in a pack and that, cardboard bubble gum that comes with it. It's a big stick. And just over time collecting them. And it was just a fun part of my youth, just being with some of my friends that were also collectors. And we were just kind of sports nerds. We weren't necessarily the best athletes in town, but we loved sports. We loved collecting. And it was just a really fun experience. And I've been fortunate to have kept all of my baseball cards all the way into my adulthood and have, kind of repurposed them in a lot of different ways.
Same thing here. Grew up in a sports family, grew up on Long Island, where all we did was play sports, and then we would watch the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Giants play baseball on television, black and white TV that became color TV. And I became a card collector. I started fairly young. I must have been 8 or 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I collected really heavily for about 5 years. Now, that was back in the day. You could buy a pack of baseball cards for 5 cents. You get 5 cards, and you get the slab of bazooka bubblegum. And that was the coolest thing. Then all the kids around me on Long Island, they collected cards and they played baseball. Now, some of the kids were avid baseball fans, and we started trading cards. Some kid would have 3 Mickey Mantles, and I didn't have any Mickey Mantles.
Mm-hmm.
So I traded him a couple Gil Hodges and Brooklyn Dodger cards, and we started swapping. Now, other kids weren't fanatical. Other kids never understood this, would play flip 'em, throw the card against the wall to see whose card could get closer. And if you lost that card. Other kids did stupid things like they would use a clothespin and put the cards on their bike by the front wheel.
Yeah.
So it would sound like a muffler.
Yeah, like a motorcycle.
Yeah, exactly.
I did that too.
Yeah. No, you're not putting a Duke Snyder card and you bend it all up on the front wheel of your bike.
Yeah.
Some kids did. And then the greatest story of all time, and I told you about this, I must have been in 5th grade. And I went to a Catholic school. And they were pretty doggone strict. And I had nuns through my entire K through 8 education. And kids brought their stuff to school. And one day, nun is up at the front of the class teaching. And she keeps looking at 2 kids sitting in the back row, a couple rows beyond me. They were doing this. She stopped the class. She walked down end of the aisle. What are you 2 guys doing? By that time, the kids' knees are knocking and they're starting to stutter. Well, we were trading baseball cards. Show me. Lift it up. The kid pulls out rubber band bunch of cards. Had to be 50 to 70 cards. How many you got? He had a box down on the floor. He put the box up. You would rather do that than listen to what I have to say about catechism and religion? You 2 to the front of the class. Marched them up, put the chairs right in front of us, put a wastebasket between the 2 kids. Take your cards out, rip them in half. I almost had a heart attack. Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra and Whitey Ford's cards getting ripped in half with the nun right there with the ruler in her hand. Those poor kids had to rip up all their cards and put them in the garbage can. And then they had a whole handout and she whacked them. Go back, get your notebook out. We're going to resume this catechism class. I was sick. I couldn't believe it. So that's my story about the history of baseball cards. I never did that because I would never gamble my cards. they had a game called Flip 'em. You take that baseball card, you flip it. If it lands on the ground with the player's face up, I have to match it. If I match it, my player face up, I take your card. If mine flips and it's the back of the baseball card, I lose my card.
Cool.
But I didn't gamble, and I surely did not put my Willie Mays card on the spokes of my bike.
Yeah, right.
Oh, a lot of stupid kids out there. The bad part about collecting was a nickel a pack, so you buy a couple packs a week. But what if you get the same player? There was a pitcher in the 1950s by the name of Elmer Singleton, journeyman guy, Chicago Cubs. Somehow, someway, I got 10 of his cards in a month. So I stopped going to that store and went to a different store to buy baseball cards because I figured all those boxes have the same cards in them. Why am I spending a nickel here to get Elmer Singleton's cards on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday? So that's my baseball card story.
Well, this is back in the day when there was no dollar value to these. It was just something we collected and we traded and we had fun with them. It wasn't until I was an adult that suddenly there were prices put on these things that became astronomical. But I remember one of my little league buddies, we would go to his garage and he and 2 or 3 other guys, we trade cards. And they were obviously trying to get all the famous players, but I just wanted to get as many giants as I could. And I would trade decent players just to get some mediocre giants because I wanted a bunch of Giants players. And they thought they were totally taking advantage of me, but I was okay with it because that was what I wanted. Now, looking back in the rearview mirror, maybe I gave up a lot of money there. But, over time, I gathered, a lot of Giants, a lot of A's. Those are my 2 local teams. And then I collected, remember in 1975, they had those mini Topps cards?
Yep.
So I have almost every one of those. But what I did is I had them stored away in shoe boxes, my old Vans tennis shoe boxes for years. And thank God my parents didn't throw them out. I've had them on my possession since I went away to college, and I've been schlepping them around. And then finally about maybe 8 years ago or so, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in my office, my man cave. And so what I did is I got all my old cards and I went to Michael's, like the arts and crafts store, and got a big frame. And I created big, it's like a 28 by 40 frame, one for the Padres, one for the Giants, one for the A's, one for National League All-Stars, and one for American League All-Stars. And I want to just show them on the screen here. So this one here is the Oakland A's. These are just all the A's cards I collected as a kid. These are the Giants cards. And you can see up at the top, like the 1972 San Francisco Giants program. And I have like ticket stubs there from Candlestick Park when I went as a kid. And then over here, the one on the right, you probably can't see the detail, but are the Padres. And then the red one are the American League All-Stars. And the one on the left are the National League All-Stars. So none of these are really rookie cards. They're not, the cards that, are worth a ton of money, but they're special to me. And so when I have them in my office and I just take a break from my work and I kind of look around, it just gives me some good vibes.
Flashback.
Totally.
You remember one. Now, I did something unique and different. And you can tell me I'm crazy or weird or off track. I was a pitcher because my dad was a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a pitcher in Little League and I was really good till I threw my arm out. For some reason, I had this idea that I needed a piece of good luck. I took a baseball card of a Baltimore Oriole pitcher that I liked to become a fan of, and I put it on the inside bill of my hat when I pitched.
Really?
And it worked.
It
I mean,
worked?
it's the most stupid thing you'd ever see in the world. I had a baseball card of Billy Odell, who was a bonus baby with the Baltimore Orioles in the 50s and got to the majors, actually pitched for the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take my hat off and I would put the Billy Odell card behind the brim of my hat, and I wear it when I pitched.
Nice.
I did that for like 2.5 to 3 years.
Just like the guys today in the major leagues, when they have the alignment that they have to, they take off their hat and look at the alignment. Wow, that's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah, it worked for me. I pitched a one-hitter one game, struck out 9. Also
Right.
got knocked out in the first inning a couple times too. So quirky things.
Well, that probably made you feel really confident when you were pitching.
I was a baseball addict. I would
Yeah.
do anything. I mean,
And if you're feeling that confidence, no wonder you were dominant on the hill.
my next door neighbor was my same age, and he was a second baseman. And we had a bet of an ice cream soda when I pitched against his team. We only played him twice a year. I pitched against him that I could strike him out. Or if he got a base hit off me, I would have to buy him the ice cream soda. Didn't work because I beaned him. I didn't strike him out. He didn't get a hit, but he wound up at first base when I plunked him with a wild pitch. Okay, what do you got there? You got some baseball cards and baseball collectibles.
Yeah, a bunch of different things here that I thought might be fun to show. I want to start with this. This is actually an interesting story behind this. This is a ball. Let me see if I can open up this case. Well, maybe I can't, but I'll put it out here. This is a ball that's signed by all the 1975 Oakland A's.
Wow.
This is the year after they won the 3 World Series. And this isn't like some sort of like print that was manufactured. I mean, these are legitimate signatures because they must have been passing the balls around in the clubhouse. And I got that because I went to an Oakland Coliseum game. And then remember you told me the story about, what was it? One of your relatives wanted to write on one of your baseball cards and it just drove you nuts.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happened with this, is that my step grandfather was there with us at the game, and my stepfather insisted that he sign the ball too.
Oh,
and I was 10 years old. I was like, no. But I had to bow in there. So somewhere in there is my step grandfather's signature, along with Reggie Jackson and Vida Blue and all the stars from that team.
My grandmother, rest in peace, she knew I was a baseball fan. I showed her all my baseball cards, and I had my baseball cards, as I told you the story, put together by team, rubber band by team. I went out to play, came back in the living room one day. She used to come spend part of the summer with us. All my baseball cards are on the table. I said, what have you been doing? She said, oh, I've been counting your cards. So she went through the Brooklyn Dodger pile. And on the top was a Don Newcomb card. And she had taken a pen and written the number 36 and circled it on the card. And I almost had a heart attack. My Don Newcomb card, what does that mean? You have 36 Brooklyn Dodger cards. And she said, you have 18 New York Giant cards. And there was a New York Giant stack, Ray Jablonski, third baseman, the number 18. I started to cry. I almost had a heart attack. And luckily, she didn't do it on the Henry Aaron card in Milwaukee or the Willie Mays card with New York. But that was just fascinating. That's cool. Yeah. I took my kids when they were really young to see the Padres play the Pirates at Jack Murphy Stadium. And my boys, who might have been 5 and 8, played Little League. One was an athlete, the catcher. He wore more equipment than was bigger than him. The other one wasn't an athlete, but he was just trying to play because his brother wanted to play. And we were there for batting practice. So my young guys, he wanted to go down and right by the rail and watch the Pirates come out of the dugout. Full disclosure, wife from West Virginia, wife Pirate fan, fanatical.
Okay.
So she dressed the kids in their Pirate jerseys or Pirate shirts. And we went and stood right by the edge of the Pirate dugout as they came out for BP at like 5:30 at night. And the deal was, okay, we'll go early and then we'll go up and we'll get some hot dogs and we'll come back for the start of the game. So we're standing there and they got their gloves and they're wearing their Pirate shirts. My younger guy's got a Pirate hat with the P. And here comes Jim Leland out of the dugout. Oh, and right after that was Brian Giles.
Oh, right on.
And Giles knew who I was. Jim didn't know. They said, you boys from Pennsylvania? I said, well, no, my wife's from West Virginia. She's a Pirates fan. Wait here, guys. Goes in, comes back out in 30 seconds. Him and Giles, 2 autographed balls for my kid. Nice. How cool is that for total strangers?
Yeah.
There's hardly anybody in the ballpark. They open a ballpark at 5:30 when hardly anybody there. So that was cool. So they've got that on their mantelpiece. Okay, let's talk about history baseball cards.
Okay.
As a talk show host, you do remember I did things called the Summer Book Review Series.
I do.
And it was really popular. And I just went and chased down authors, all kinds of books, got them to send me a review copy. We'd follow up and we'd do a 15-minute interview on my talk show about the book. I did it every summer. And a chunk of it was baseball. Some of it was NFL, NBA, hockey, etc. So anyhow, I came across this author who put out this book in the late 1990s. It's the history of Topps baseball cards. And Topps is the company that started printing most of the baseball cards in the late 40s into the 50s.
Nice.
And they did it for 45 plus years. And then, of course, I think they were sold and they were bought out multiple times. But this is what we grew up on. This is what baseball fan kids, collectors grew up on. This is a book that has a picture of every baseball card that Topps ever printed.
Really?
It's really fascinating.
Cool.
Now, I went back and I pulled just a couple of select years. Back in the late 1940s, they were just starting. Used to give baseball cards in tobacco pouches.
Yeah.
And then I think they did baseball cards with loaves of bread. This is one of the first baseball cards that Topps ever printed. This is 1948, and these were small cards. Now, it was a headshot. It was the same graphic on every card they had. But this is in the 1940s. Kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was a kid collecting cards for a 5-year window or so, I ran into some older kids that had a box of baseball cards and I'm going to throw them out. I said, let me see them. So they popped them open. They had all these small cards that had been printed by Topps and other companies for a year or two. They gave them to me. Absolutely. I still have them in the back of my closet. If I could get in the back of my closet, I would have brought them. So that's the beginning of what Topps was. And then as they printed more cards graphically, they decided to use all the players. And they signed contracts with all these players. I don't know what kind of money these players got, maybe $75 a year, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody had a baseball card.
Cool.
Well, then, do they do headshots or do they do action shots? How do we use the logo? So this is what year? I can't read that.
1955.
1955 from the Topps baseball cards. They decided to use headshots, logo, block names for all the players. And then on the back of the card, you'd have their career major league record and maybe 1 or 2 sentences about he pitched a no-hitter in the minor leagues in Richmond, Virginia.
Nice.
So, yeah. So they started to get really creative. So this was 55. The best ones I ever saw was they decided they were going to use action photos, John. Now, this is 1956 from Topps. And every card has the player's headshot with an action photo beneath him.
Nice.
I mean, and I thought that was the grooviest thing I'd ever seen is baseball action and guys sliding into home plate or making plays at first base. Or there's a Jerry Coleman card here of Jerry Coleman turning a double play, an action photo of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And,
nice.
And they would lay Jerry Coleman's headshot above it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was one of the really cool things I ever saw. And again, the longer Topps did this, the more they got creative, and then obviously they went back to headshots, etc. Then they went back to kind of glitzy graphics and the logos and the names of the teams. This is 1975. This would be in like the Pete Rose era of cards. And this was a different layout than I had ever experienced before. I didn't like this one as much, but you probably grew up looking for a giant.
Those were
like
very common style. I remember that. It was one of those years.
Yeah. And then we fast forward from there and we go into 1995, and these were much more clearer. The photography was much better, and you can see all these different players, and some were action shots, some were headshots. So that's the history of baseball card collecting. And I bet if you were to go on Amazon, you could probably buy this somewhere. The book.
Yeah.
Topps baseball cards. That's what it's called. But it's a pictorial history of every baseball card that Topps ever printed.
Nice.
And, we think now based in Carlsbad, we have Upper Deck,
right,
which have been very, very successful. And they've expanded and they do football and hockey and NBA and all that. But this was the genesis of how this began. And young kids like you in the Bay Area and me on Long Island, we got addicted to doing this. My stuff survived. My dad threw everything else I owned out while I was at college, but my baseball cards were hidden in the back cubbyhole upstairs in my bedroom, and he never got to the baseball cards, and I'm thankful, and I've got them in my back closet. And you think about, that's what, 50 plus 23? That's 73 years of age.
Yeah.
Now, there was a stretch of time in the 90s and into the 2000s where baseball card stores opened up in shopping centers.
I remember that.
And I used to go in there and look and etc. And I never traded stuff. I never gave my stuff away. I bought some stuff that I found there that I really wanted. They kind of took part in my collection. So it's cool because it's fantasy and it goes back to your life, back when life was really simple. And the only thing you and I would worry about was, would Willie Mays go 4 for 4 against the Milwaukee Braves, or who's going to pitch against Mickey Mantle at Yankee Stadium with the bases loaded? That's where our life kind of revolved around. It's a fun thing. And in our current lives today, we don't have a lot of time to enjoy where we came from, what we used to. But I started to look at this, and you went back in the back of your closet in your bookcase and look what you found. That's kind of cool.
It's really neat. I mean, because on a lot of levels, because like to your point, it's a trip down memory lane, all those good vibes when we were a kid. And you remember all these players because you followed them so closely. But on another level, this is just a really kind of cool form of American art.
Yep.
You know, and this is the kind of thing that makes baseball a kind of a very romantic sport, you know, where people are collecting the cards and there's this whole subculture around it. It's a beautiful thing. And it's also how I think baseball back in the day was the dominant sport, because kids were essentially propagandized with all of this and they became huge fans of the sport. But it's just really amazing. For those of us that have been able to save those cards, even if they're not necessarily a Mickey Mantle rookie, they're so feel good when you reconnect with them.
Exactly. And you better keep them in mint condition.
Yeah. Well, I want to show one other card here. I got this. My kids got me this for Father's Day. It's I don't know if you can see it here, but it's a rookie, Ricky Henderson. So I think that's pretty cool. So all kinds of things. I mean, I went out, you know, when I travel on business, I always like to go to the ballpark to whatever city I'm in. And I was in Tokyo about 25 years ago, and I went and saw some Japanese baseball games. And so I got the Japanese program here. And then this is like a, the Yomiuri Giants, the Tokyo Giants. And that's the manager with signatures from all the players on the team. So I just got all kinds of funky stuff that I've collected over time. And it's just cool. You know, like right here is a 1981 photo album of Candlestick Park for the Giants. And so there are pictures in here of, there's Darrell Evans and Tom Griffin.
Well, hold it up to the camera there.
Yeah, I think I'll show Darrell Evans here because, you know, he was a Brave and he was a Giant. And who else did he play for? I can't remember. Yeah, the Braves and the Giants. Gary Lavelle. I mean, this is the team that I grew up on.
And that's cool because it flashes back. This is a neat picture of Candlestick when it wasn't raining. Must have been the odd day there when it wasn't cold.
Yeah, they probably took that like about 10 in the morning, you know, when the weather was good. So I just got a bunch of this stuff. And my wife gives me a hard time because she says, I can remember the most minute baseball statistic from back in the day, but I can never remember the names of the children of her friends. I guess my hard disk in my head is just too full of baseball nerd stuff.
And I can remember the biggest trade in baseball history, 1954, the Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles, 18 players. 18. And I was sitting on the front porch of my house on Long Island reading this newspaper story when people used to read newspapers. Now, that being said, I can remember Gus Triandos and all those great Baltimore Orioles for that one given year in that trade. But I'm sorry, can't remember my wedding date. I forget.
You still can't remember your wedding date?
My wife's birthday.
Oh, man.
At least 5 times. Now, this came from somebody who was working 7.5 days a week and was meeting himself coming and going in the airport. My wife says, how can you remember this meaningless 18-player trade, but you can't remember the day we got married?
But it's not meaningless. That was an important part of your life at that time.
The greatest thing, sitting at the breakfast table. She looks at me and says, do you know what day this is? I said, yeah, Tuesday. Do you know what this date is? I'm terrible with dates. No, I don't know. You don't know what the date is. I said, smart girl, you got the cell phone, look it up. And she says, last I checked, it was our anniversary. Oh, but at least I haven't consisted. I've missed it 5 times, I'm sure, over the course. Okay, before we go to the